Welcome to day 3 of AWE. I'm excited that you're here. Thank you for sharing your time and your energy. This is an exciting conference, and we are thrilled to dive into neuroscience and policy in XR. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to introduce our incredible speakers today. I would start out with April Boyd-Noronha. April is amazing. She is the interim CEO of XR-SI, also known as the XR Safety Intelligence. If you haven't looked into them, definitely take a point to do so. It is an incredible resource of depth and breadth of knowledge in the industry. And she is currently the CEO of XR-SI, the first 501c3 global SDO with the mission of helping building safe and inclusive emerging realities. She helped lead XR-SI's launch of the immersive technology standards for accessibility, inclusion, ethics, and the safety in 2020 that paved the way for today's safe design and deployment of immersive technologies in the industry. April has over 2 decades of experience in academia and advanced technology as an author, global speaker, keynote speaker, thought leader, and advisor on emerging trends. In her role as principal consultant at the STEM Broker, LLC, she lectures and consults on the future of work, on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility of historically marginalized populations. April is also the Global Security Awareness Manager for a Fortune 50 company responsible for engaging 48,000 employees in over 30 countries. That's incredible. She continues to blaze a trail in equitable practices as the first Black elected school board member of the Shawnee Mission School District. The Shawnee Mission School District, which is the 3rd largest district in the state of Kansas, April is the parent of 3 technologists who are accomplished motivational speakers who share their experience of pursuing a STEM career track in the IT, cybersecurity, engineering, and environmental science. If you want to learn more about April, please connect with her on LinkedIn and check out thestembroker.com. And I'm pleased to announce our second speaker here, Dr. Erik Viirre. He is the director of the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination at UC San Diego. And Erik is not only an MD, he's also a PhD professor at UC San Diego, and he's done a lot in his career. He is an imaginative person, and as a virtual and augmented reality technologist, Dr. Viirre has worked on human safety and medical applications of the virtual retina display, which is the first in-the-eye laser-based display system. Dr. Viirre has also worked on assessment of human effects and medical applications of head-mounted displays, including uses in people with low vision and vestibular disorders. He has had funding from the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, the US Navy, DARPA, NASA, just to name a few, and a variety of corporate sources on HMD technology developments and other topics. He has numerous publications and patents, including those related to HMD use and display of human effects. He has developed a variety of eye movement recording systems, including eye movement recording integrated into VR HMD. And if that wasn't enough, he received his PhD in neurophysiology in 1987 at the University of Western Ontario in London, Canada, and his PhD dissertation was on the coordination control system of binocular eye movements. That's incredible. He completed a rotating internship at St. Joseph's Medical Center in London, Canada in 1989. After his internship in London, he was a fellow at the Roberts Research Institute in Functional Imaging and had an eye care practice. These two are incredible people. I could go on and on with their bios, but I want to dive into the conversation today and pull some threads of their knowledge and expertise. That way you feel like you can leave this conversation feeling informed on policy and XR and what you can do as a member of the community to continue to push this forward in an ethical and safe way. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Let's go.
Yeah, okay. First question here is, what is the state of human rights policies as it intersects with neuroscience? Let's just start there.
Well, you gave me the hard question first there, Ava.
Yes, why not?
Well, and the answer is that we're still in very early days from a virtual interaction point of view on these kinds of policies. And that's, as I often like to say, a bad news, good news situation. It's bad news because we're kind of in the dark on where to go forward. But it's the good news is that we can start now rather than waiting for the aftermath or problems to show up. we can get ahead of the game. And as April and I were talking about earlier, I'm always anxious to find out other examples, precedents. What can we look at? So just yesterday, the Surgeon General was talking about putting warning labels on social media. But that seems to me to be a really after action, after the horse has left the barn kind of a approach to things, unfortunately. So because of our powerful technology here, we want to be in advance of what might occur both in the human behavioral side of things, as well as the human behavioral social side of things, as well as the body effects, the brain effects that we can and do induce by entering into VR experiences. So we're still in very early days. So we absolutely need policy leaders to really help us define where we want to go.
Absolutely.
And I want to take a different perspective here. When we think about where we are now and where we can look back to that has set a precedence, I want to bring this to your attention that in 1948, the United Nations drafted a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Just take this context for a minute. And I think that kind of set the standard for basic human rights and dignity in the perspective of what we're talking about today. It definitely further spurred an international perspective or standard-bearing aspect. That law or that framework, standard, I'll call that as it is today, has been translated in about 530 variations since then. So if we talk about precedents, if we talk about where can we go from here or from there, that was a good start. But they do understand that we need to move forward and that we need changes at this time as well, especially in and at the intersection of neuroscience. So as it stands currently, though, there are concerns about technologies that can read from and write to the brain. So XRSI personally wants to talk about novel rights and frameworks and standards to specifically address that.
Incredible. And we're at a really pivotal moment right now. It's 2024. We are approaching the new digital frontier, and there are a lot more experimental opportunities right now for implants. We were having a discussion of what that looks like, and I would love to get your thoughts on the term cyber sickness. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, well, so cyber sickness, a topic of my personal research. So this is the experience of motion sickness that some people have when they enter a virtual environment. So that can be, for some people, even as simple as looking at a moving screen on their smartphone. So just a little wee display like that can induce motion sickness in some people. So there's a wide variation in the tendency to cyber sickness, this motion sickness from entering these virtual environments. And our, so we know, so it's from millennia of human experience, we know about things like seasickness, which is similar to cyber sickness, but not exactly the same. So we have ideas of what's going on in the brain when these phenomena appear. And then what we want to do is know about them and reduce them, especially for those people who have a terrible activation of motion sickness when they enter virtual environments. So I can see the audience a little bit out here, but can we do a poll? Can we do an audience poll? Who's experienced cyber sickness in virtual reality? Okay, so pretty much the majority of the audience are telling us that, yeah, I've had a thing. So it's absolutely for real. And it's not just motion sickness. There are other things like eye discomfort and headaches, and just not even thinking clearly. You know, the hot term these days is cognitive fog. And so many of us, we just don't think right after having these having these sensations activated for us. So this is a brain phenomenon, and so clearly a neuroscience issue for us who work with virtual reality technologies.
Fascinating. And quick follow-up question there.
Okay.
Do you think cyber sickness will ever be classified in the DSM?
Oh, that's a neat question. It well could be. And we don't classify motion sickness as a psychological disorder. You know, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and it's around psychological conditions. So the DSM is about things like anxiety and depression and other psychological conditions. But as I said, there's this side of cyber sickness and so many other things that are happening to us, like in the long COVID, for example, of this cognitive fog, this interference with thinking. So it's not implausible to me that good call there. It could end up in the DSM.
Yeah, who knows? April, what are your thoughts?
Well, I tell you, from a perspective of research, and as I mentioned before, the impact of keeping the human at the forefront, that it's human-centered research that we do, we need to focus on that, and then look at the, even drill back even further and looking at the rights that surround that. Two of the rights could be, from a standards perspective, is right to mental privacy. So as we're looking at the sickness, right?
Sure.
And determining, what are factors? But do those factors, as we drill down even further, do they impact a certain population? And things of that sort. Those are things that we look at as the XRSI, because we know that it's important throughout the development, throughout the research, to keep the focus on the patient, the end user, the human. And that's one thing that's always at the forefront of how we approach any of the standards, or when companies or governments come to us for consulting. We always remind them that, yes, we see the issue, we see the problem, whether it's systemic, whether it's a global issue, but we also have to always keep the human in mind.
Plus one to that, I think we are definitely in the age of the premium of human connection.
Yep.
So it's really important to take note of that. So my next question here for the both of you, in what areas should policy be introduced, especially in this age of AI and machine learning? April, I'll start with you.
What area? Wow. Well, I'll come at it from this angle. What has served XRSI well is that we have always come from the aspect of collaborative effort. When we advised the Australian government on their expansion of AI and digital safety for all of their population, we immediately grabbed a team of XRSI experts, thought leaders, scientists, doctors, and looked at the aspect of what they were asking. How do we launch an expansive program? So collaborative efforts, even from areas that you thought that may not work, has really proved paramount for us in moving forward in developing our standards. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, we're one of the few standard developing organizations as a nonprofit in this industry. And so we take it very seriously, and we don't pretend to be the gods of that, this knowledge or setting standards, but we understand that that is a critical starting point to get those guardrails, to get those frameworks in place. More importantly, industry-wide.
Very important, especially as Erik mentioned, being proactive rather than
Yes.
reactive. It's a critical time right now. Erik, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would want to double emphasize what you just said, and so it's super impressive that XRSI and other policy shops are thinking about that for us. And maybe here's the thing I'd like to frame it with. So when I had the very great honor of being able to work in one of the preeminent virtual reality laboratories in the 1990s, the Human Interface Technology Laboratory at the University of Washington, where I worked on cyber sickness and augmented reality displays, and saw just a whole variety of amazing things that were appearing. So wanting to see these technologies examined and studied comes from the director of the HIT lab, Dr. Furness, Tom Furness, who has been honored with in our conference. And Tom was always on, the virtual reality, it's the awesomest stuff. It's going to change the world. We're going to do so many things. So with awesome power comes awesome responsibility. And so the phenomena that VR and XR can create are powerful. So for example, one of the projects that was going on in the laboratory at that time was reduction of pain using virtual reality. And it can reduce pain. So, okay, well, now we get into this realm of regulation of neuroscience and neuroscience technology. So we've been monitoring and regulating pain technologies forever. We have a century of regulatory experience on pain medications. So is VR Tylenol, or is it morphine? Is it a controlled substance, or can you buy it at 7-Eleven? In fact, based on what we saw in the experiments by the amazing psychology researchers in the HIT lab, it's really powerful. They were literally using it to mitigate pain in the burn units of children having their burn dressings changed. So making a substantial and measurable difference. In fact, sometimes better than the drugs that were offered to these people. So a very powerful technique and technology. And so, well, all right. So now we're making a claim that it reduces pain. Well, how do we validate that? Who regulates that? Who looks into that? So from a medical point of view, we already have a process for those kinds of things. So if you're going to make a claim like that, you have to have science behind it that has been vetted and examined and studied and published before then you would get an approval to make a medical claim that these technologies reduce pain. So that's the world that I come from, where we do clinical trials on all kinds of technologies, doing tests and experiments, and then elevating those that seem to be both effective but also safe. So safety is the number one issue for us. So safety is the paramount construct that we come from. So and safety comes at all kinds of levels. We have to have safety for people who work on these technologies, not the test subjects, but the people who work in the laboratories. And I will tell you that laboratory workers get injured doing research and technology development. So there needs to be safety even at the bench level. And then when we get into human testing, we have to examine the safety of the research subjects who volunteer to test these technologies that we have in clinical trials. And in fact, there's a whole construct around safety and human research that you need to be certified in to be able to do this kind of work in ethics of clinical research. And then there needs to be safety at the top level when we get these technologies out into society and monitor these things and what they're doing. So, so the good news is that we have a construct from these very powerful medical claims, like a powerful pain mitigation, and how we can formally evaluate that. The bad news is it's frickin' expensive and a lot of hard work. And so it's always a challenge for our, even our big companies who are building technologies to do the proper and formal evaluations in a regulatory framework. So, so as I say, it's a big job, but at least there's a way around that. There's a way to start from it. And in fact, it comes from around World War II as well, when there were, of course, all kinds of terrible precedents on things that were done to humans testing things, but those were then translated into the formal idea of human dignity. And that's the underlying concept that human research starts from, is dignity.
So from a policy aspect, so I used to be an HIM, Health Information Management professor as well. And one thing, and you know this, Erik, informed consent models.
Right.
Fundamental principles, right, when you're dealing with conduct and ethical conduct and research. And so the XRSI privacy and safety framework, I want to read this to you. We determined a term in reference to informed consent models, and it's informed consent is a process that ensures individuals are adequately informed about the purpose, methods, risks, benefits, and potential alternatives of a procedure or intervention, including the handling and use of that personal data, right? We always circle back to that person's data. And so we came up with 4 particular pillars to focus on in this context, in this framework, privacy and safety framework. The context, is it clear and transparent to all those involved, as Erik mentioned, from the patient to the physician to those working in the clinicals and the labs, to all involved? Is it clear on what we're doing here? The control, going back to the individual digital rights, they exist, right? And they must be abided by on all levels of regulation, because that person wants to manage their own data. What did that do? Bring it back full circle to that individual. Choice, right? Are you opting in? Are you opting out along the process? But multiple options should be available. And then last but not least, that respect and autonomy, right? Recognizing and upholding that person's right to control their neural data. How is it collected? How is it used? How is it shared? Is it data banked? What's going on with all this personal data that you're assessing and having access to, that I did or didn't opt into, or did all these come into play, that us at XRSI have created and started the conversation with privacy and the safety framework.
And this is so important for everyone to pay attention to, because if you think about it, there's so much personal identifiable information based on if you get into a headset and it's doing the automatic eye calibration. Okay, now it can assess that I might be a person with a disability. You know, I didn't consent to that. And that goes into a model that could be used to train things. So I think we're at a really pivotal time right now to help provide a little bit more awareness of the importance of our personal data and how it goes into the data sets that are used to being trained a lot of things.
And let me tag on to this. You said that you didn't, a person may not have opted into, but once you click that button or enter that platform, you really did.
Yeah.
Didn't read those 30 pages of, this, that, and, the rules and regulations, but if you've entered that platform, yeah, you really did. So all of our kids, just playing around on a Saturday afternoon, yeah, access to all that data. And they said yes. Give or take a couple 30 pages of reading, but yeah, they did essentially.
But and to add on to that, the importance that you mentioned there, it's a choice. We have a choice.
We do.
And sometimes we exercise it, sometimes we don't. But remembering that it's there is important. And this next question here kind of ties some of this together. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on some methods to mitigate potential risks and impacts of neurotechnologies on human rights? Let's talk about that in the context of U.S. policy, at least for now.
Yeah. Erik kind of referenced this, that it almost has to be a case-by-case basis. Now, we can see certain populations, certain times, certain frameworks, certain diseases or things we've already diagnosed, but it really has to be context sensitive. It has to be flexible to change too. This phenomenon, it's evolving as we're sitting here and talking about it now. And also, like I said before, it really is fundamentally a case-by-case basis. This is why XRSI and other organizations always caution through that development process that human in the loop is pivotal. It's crucial, because if you miss it there, if it's not embedded, right, as a human-centric aspect, they're going to miss something along the way, whether it's research, whether it's development. That has to be a pivotal aspect there, having that human in the loop.
Absolutely. And if you look at some of the policy that has been implemented by the current administration, the AI Bill of Rights came out 2 summers ago, and it talks about a lot of this.
Yeah.
People, exactly. Exactly. What are your thoughts?
So, wanting to emphasize something that you were saying, which is the opt-out, right? And being able, and I think this is, so you were mentioning U.S. policy, but I think this is really in the EU where they're being much more vigorous about it, where you can go back and they have to be able to backtrack. Mm-hmm. So in human research, it's interesting because you can't click and consent. So in fact, if you are a research subject in a clinical trial, you have to have, there's a formal process of who gives the consent, and that you have understood it, and that the consent is actually written in a language that is understandable. And there's an explicit opt-out. You can opt out at any time. So I have done this, and I encourage all of you, if you're curious, to be a volunteer for our human subjects clinical trial. It doesn't have to be for cyber sickness and virtual reality. So we don't have, doesn't have to be yucky like that. Although we need people for those experiments, mm-hmm. But even just a psychological test or something like that, and you can see what a human volunteer for human research is really experiences, and contrast that with the scroll down and click where do I put that thing so I can load the app, you know. That's right. So informed consent, so it's not consent, it's informed consent.
Key word,
right?
Yeah.
And so that, and again, literally it's totally the opposite. The process is scrutinized not by the lawyers for the company, but by the people who are charged with the safety of human subjects. Research is something called an Institutional Review Board, IRB. Mm-hmm. So IRBs are super, super important. And again, we have millions and millions of research studies going on in the United States all the time. So this process is there. So I have optimism. I remain optimistic that from the precept of human dignity, where this all starts, that we all get a chance to experience and have technologies that are safe and exciting and powerful. Mm-hmm. And the follow-on to that is, again, forgive me for coming from the medical side, but I come from the medical side. So there's another process that goes on in medical technologies and drugs, which is post-market observation. So what happens is, even though a drug is approved by the FDA or a technology is approved by the FDA, that's not the end of the story. And this is analogous to car manufacturers as well. They have to keep logs, they have to formally keep records of accidents and adverse effects, because we may test thousands of people to approve a medical technology or a drug, but then millions and millions of people are going to have them for long periods of time. And that's when we often learn, well, we didn't know this, but these follow-on effects appear sometime, somehow, somewhere. And again, there's a responsibility to that. So as we build our technologies, you can't just send it out there. You got to have a process where you monitor what's going on and keep track of that and update and change things if problems appear.
Interesting.
And we talked about the flexibility before, but I want to shift a little bit also to include that risk assessment, right? Kind of to what Erik is saying there. It doesn't stop, right, once you enter a platform. It doesn't stop once a certain scenario has been initiated. And so one thing that we look at with our privacy and safety framework was, what are areas that we can flag, right, that may be potential risks while they're collecting that data, right? And so these data collections may be infringing possibly on human rights. We talked about dignity and health or well-being of that subject, of that end user, of that child that is in that environment. So, we talk about, is the neural data being banked? Is it being encrypted? Privacy, safety. Is the neural data collection, we talked about already, opt-in or opt-out? That choice should, and as you say, we're kind of getting there like the EU, but is that a part of that process? Were privacy and data rights written into the consumer or government neurotech collection models? Is it embedded within that framework, right? Is it having the brain read or written to a requirement for getting that health or life insurance? This is the real world stuff, right? Does it matter when is it a condition of employment, right? And when it kind of creeps into that real world, that real life day-to-day implications and intersections, that's where we're going. I don't know if I want that to be a part of my process, but that is where we're going. That this neuroscience and the data that's collected or that is inferred from that data, what is it going to tell an employer and insurer? That's where we're heading.
Once you take the toothpaste out of the tube, you can't put it back in.
It's squeezed out already, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's there.
It is. It is.
So how are we applying it? What are the unintended implications or consequences that are going to occur along the way?
It's important to help people remind of each other of that we have to think about the future now. For example, I don't know if you would align this with like 23andMe. Whenever you share that information, you don't know where that's going to go 10 years from now. Is that going to be used to deny you an insurance policy? Who knows?
Because it's happened before. We know that cases...
Life insurance, if you opt in to see like the potential
expectancy...
Predispositions,
life insurance is affected, but health insurance is not. But that could change.
It could change.
Exactly.
Some of the research that we're looking at, could the neuroscience data be used as in the place of lie detectors, right? Because it's available, the data is there, inferences can be made, right? So it's becoming more real in daily life.
Absolutely. Now, you both are professionals. You have such a wide depth of experience. I'm curious, what are your thoughts as parents, especially in this digital age, as we're looking at privacy and trying to build a more sustainable, ethical digital future?
Erik, I'll let you take that one. I just finished talking.
Well, so I have two children. Both of them are gamers. And my youngest, a few years ago, said, "Dad, virtual reality is coming." And he was 9 years old at that point. So and of course, I've worked on this technology for decades, and know its awesomeness and its power.
Yeah.
So I have to confess, we let VR into the house, and went to all kinds of VR experiences. Beat Sabers was pretty popular, I will say.
I love it.
But age limits are certainly a huge important issue, and developmental effects, one of the physical effects of being immersed in VR, but then again, the powerful emotional effects of the experiences that we're building. So, just like video games with the parental advisory ratings on them, we have to be much in the same way. And of course, our kids are roaming around out there looking at things that we never got to see. So I fear the effects of this. My feeling is that overall, the large majority of kids are going to be fine, but there will be big challenges for many, many children. So I'm nervous about it, and I'm not sure how we manage that.
Yeah.
Again, we have other industries and other technologies that we have examples to look for. So I don't know, what do you think, April, about parental regulation?
One thing that we always remind people that visit our website, anyone that's interested in the ecosystem, is you can't unsee what you've seen. That experience is there, right? So that's like one of the first cautionary aspects that we introduce to people, regardless of their context or understanding of VR and XR. So I have 3 children. I have 2 daughters and a son. The son is the youngest, and all 3 of them are in STEM fields. So they're familiar with, hey, the privacy, the security, those aspects in and of itself as an end user. So it really hasn't been an issue for us that they're aware of it because mommy does what she does and she's in the arena. But it still is hard to navigate because they're very social beings. They're young, right? I too tried to stave off the introduction, was not successful. But within my home, and then hopefully my children did kind of extend that safety aspect and perspective before you click the button, before you accept something as you're in that platform. But because I distinctly remember as I began to venture into VR and XR, I would always enter a room, and I remember one person asked me, "Does racism end? Or does it exist in VR?" And I'm like, "Yeah, right." And I always remember this one time I entered a room, and earlier on I had an avatar that looked like me, and in more than one room I would enter, and you could feel the pin drop, and you see all the heads swivel, literally, and look at me, and I'm like, and when this dude asked me, yeah, racism, and just the same experiences in real life occur in the digital realm as well. And so experiences are real, right? So we have to be cognizant of that. It doesn't just stop when you teleport to a room, right? Those experiences are real, and they stay with us, and they have impacts on decisions that are made, other experiences that we made, right? Because after that effect, sorry, jumping down the rabbit hole, I spoke with other enthusiasts within the realm, and it just blew my mind that this one other lady who is deep into XR and the experience comes in and appears as purple. And I was like, "Why are you purple?" You know, she's like, "Because people can't tell they can't tell who I am." And I'm like, that freaking defeats the purpose. But I get it.
Wow, fascinating. Well, as we start to kind of wrap up this conversation, this has been an incredible, incredible convo. I'm curious, what is one piece of advice you would give to the audience for being an active participant in this current day and age of following policy, following the innovation that's happening? Like we mentioned earlier, the EU really has a great framework. Yeah. There's great initiative like the Center for Democracy and Technology is trying to prepare to lay some of those frameworks onto the US, but we're taking a little bit of time there. So what is your piece of advice for the audience of staying involved in this?
You know, I got involved in XR by jumping in feet first, not looking back, and was like, I'm gonna learn whatever needs to be learned. And I haven't looked back. It's fascinating, always evolving. Intersections, like we're seeing now with neuroscience, will continue to appear that further broadens the aspect of what we can do and make it better. And one thing that we do at XRSI, we take a global perspective, and our standards, we look at them from an industry-wide aspect. So we want the dream is for everyone to be on that one page to understand what needs to be done for the better good.
I like that.
So collaborative effort, and just get out there and get in it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry, April, you really just kind of blew me away with your anecdote there. And I guess it really kind of fits with my own admonition, which is to take note of an experience like that. And let's hope that they're all not just challenges, but awe-inspiring experiences as well, which I've certainly had in VR. And I guess that's what I'd like you to do is actually embrace them. Embrace the awe-inspiring experiences and keep note of the adverse ones. So if you have, and we already did this cyber sickness poll, well, if this one really bothers you and it was unpleasant for you, that's something we need to know. We need to know that so many of our people are having unpleasant experiences. I have come now, VR experiences have been around long enough that I've certainly encountered people who just say, they'll just throw the head-mounted display away. They do not even want to get close to it because it's an aversive event. So there's those of us who have the awe and the challenge or the awesome experience of seeing the Grand Canyon or the dinosaur or the things up and close, but then the aversive effects are important. So the kids whose pain is controlled so that they can get through the burn unit, but then these adverse human effects in there too. So it's the power of VR that I think is still most compelling and important to us. And I think it's so there's a larger policy and experiences and the different things, the working for companies and games and entertainment and all that sort of thing. But ultimately, it's the individual profound experiences, good and bad, that I ask you to hold on to and be able to communicate and help us with.
And I do want to add one thing. So we have Dr. Erik here, and we have April, whatever, right? And so people really look at us high esteem, and I get that. But we are just parents. We are just curious, right? So, if policy is something that you really, really want to and think that you can make an impact in, find where your love and the love and passion is in it for it, right? Because there's somewhere, some org, some passionate initiative out there, well, you will fit and make a difference. And I'm one of them. I didn't know I'd be in XR policy, and here I am on the stage. But I love it, and I see the impact of it, so that's where I choose to make my change.
Wow, that's a lasting impact.
There you go.
Incredible. Amazing. Well, you two, I want to thank you both for just your contribution to the industry, all the hard work that you're doing. I know there's a lot of things that you both do that maybe don't get a lot of limelight that has helped further the industry to where we are today. So now I'd like to open it up to the audience for any questions that they may have, whether it's how to get more involved, whether it's questions about cyber sickness. We want to hear from you. So who would like to go first? Yes. Do you mind using the mic over there so everyone can hear you?
First of all, thank you very much. It was very informative and inspiring to hear you guys talk. I teach at USC in the Safe Community Institute, and so safety's a whole big narrative, and we have a table downstairs on what's called the digital twin. And so our whole narrative is about environment. And we talk about reality, and I talk about environment. And you say you can't unsee what you've seen. I came to this talk to talk about, or to hear, I should say, this premise about what neuroscience is really working on and what it means to work on this transformational model that has this digital responsibility that you talked about. So my question, specific question is, can either of you talk to what Justice 40 means, which is a $1.4 trillion infrastructure bill where 40% is to benefit the disadvantaged community, around a term called the environment? Because I believe XR extends reality, which is really about the environment at the end of the day, because it's in our subconscious now, how we actually behave and how we make decisions. And we teach this at the university, and we work with leadership, So I wonder if either of you are knowledgeable about it, can speak to it, but it's a whole big idea to build a digital twin, operate cities, and then
Schools.
environment in disadvantaged communities is a really big deal because this is embedding value proposition. And I heard you say it, I heard you say United Nations. We talk about sustainability design goals. It may seem out of the forum for XR, but it actually is the form of XR because we can project a new reality to our constituents.
I'll start with this. The last two, and it's a selfish plug, but it speaks directly to what you're saying. The last two words of our name is secure. I'm drawing a blank. Is intelligence and safety. Those two alone are like the foundational concept of why we do what we do and how we approach any consulting or any advising or any frameworks that we start developing. So I'll start with that.
And I think that's incredible because that's not required in the US right now. Right now, it's all voluntary until we get to a place where regulation is saying you must do X, Y, Z.
The affordances that VR technologies give for all humans, even people without sight can still have a profound VR experience and utility. I've worked on a variety of activities on advocacy for people with disabilities and various neurological conditions. So we know that these kinds of technologies can help. So our big challenge is then making it accessible and i.e. affordable to the communities. So having worked with small companies before, they say, well, you know, yeah, the people with disabilities, they have a real need, but they don't have any money. They can't buy the things that we're trying to build. So how do we even start creating something that way? So it's this push and pull for advocacy for people with disabilities, but I think it has to be built into the industry and a big initiative like this where there's a set aside of both money for research as well as money for technology to be provided to as many people as possible. That's going to be the big, because we know it can work. We know these things can help people.
And if consideration is kind of to what you said, if it's embedded in the process, then we can begin to chip away at it being not affordable for particular populations. There are workarounds, but it has to be embedded in the financing of big tech, right? They have to see that as a need as well.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great question. You know, I like that because it applies in all things of like inclusive design, accessibility, build with, not for. If you're baking a cupcake and you leave the egg out, that's what you're gonna have. You're gonna have a terrible cupcake at the end of the day, and you can't just go ahead and put it back in. So think of it that way, if that's one way to remember that analogy together. Thank you.
But that is a good question.
Anyone else have a question that's burning that they really want to ask?
I'm writing my thesis on the emotive properties of VR for emergency procedures training. So, like, I see the future that hopefully one day we can use these biometrics to measure people whilst they're training to really make sure that they're prepared for the job. Obviously, there's going to be neuroscience policy that's involved there, but also employment, policy that's highly invasive. But for other means that you can't train these things, how else are you going to know that people are prepared? Just kind of like what your opinions are on that, especially pertaining to moving to, I'm in aviation, but to a competency-based training assessments rather than hours-based or these check-the-boxes type thing. I really think that neuroscience is sort of like, it's their responsibility of that community to sort of validate these things that we already know, that we've experienced, and there's tons of studies and everybody's getting these results. So, but of course, the FDA and everybody else wants cold hard facts and numbers. So I guess the particular question is in employment, I would say if you had any thoughts on that, and as far as using neuroscience to measure performance.
Well, so at UCSD, we're trying to walk the talk. So we have a very important institute on empathy and compassion, and we've been super fortunate that the institute has provided, and I'm sorry, it's empathy and compassion for healthcare professionals. So we're trying to teach our own to start. And in fact, through that institute, they provided us grants to create virtual environments for empathy training. So in fact, you can enter as a healthcare professional as different colored, different gendered, different sexual orientation kind of person, and address those kinds of experiences. I had a vivid story told once of a trans medical student who got sick and went to the emergency room and had terrible experience because of their sexual orientation. And this is a person who's training to be a doctor. So they learned the hard way how bad it is. So what we want to, and in fact, at our institution, we have some of the world's leading brain evaluation technologies. So we're literally using that to detect signatures of empathy and compassion. What if you don't have a signature of empathy and compassion? How does that affect your employability? A non-trivial question. Is this something that can be trained in some people? We, in our institution and globally, these are things, especially in healthcare, with burnout of healthcare professionals, our ability to empathize with the people that we care for is a big, big challenge, and we're trying to make that work. And VR technologies are absolutely part of that, where we're going.
And I'll add that in my day-to-day responsibilities as a global cybersecurity awareness manager, one thing that has proven very valuable and impactful for those that I help educate with the security awareness is real-world tabletops. So we throw them in there and we get I and my team create the craziest scenarios that could possibly happen, but we want them to feel and experience that impact, right? What is your role in this particular situation? Whether you're the manager, peer, what have you, well, it doesn't even matter what their role is. But from your aspect, what could you have done and what can you do to change a particular behavior? So that's really worked for us. Real world tabletop exercises, maybe annually mandated, right? Whatever works better for that particular area or company or employer.
And I love your thesis topic, and I want to recommend checking out the Department of Labor Office of Disability Employment Policy. There's a lot of great resource and emerging publications. I did a research paper with data scientists from 4 different applicant tracking systems in the US and asked them, how are you taking these data sets? And are you using these data sets to train your models? Are they outside data sets? Are they internal? What does that look like? Do you have a human in the loop process? So I recommend checking those out. That might help inform some of your thesis topic, but I appreciate you sharing that. It's a great question. Thank you. We have another one.
Oh, she's the moderator.
I think this
the
will
track
probably
chair.
be the last one.
Hi guys, I'm Ritika Paditala and I'm from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I'm researching about integrating neuroscience and neuromarketing into XR and marketing. So I'm trying to understand what triggering consumer brains and while experiencing interactive experiences that brands can create for them and use that data to help brands to reach their consumers in a better way. So I wanted to know your view about this research topic since I got started and I wanted to get some insights from you guys. It would be amazing.
Great question.
I'll let you start because I have a term here I want to introduce.
All right. Well, so it seems a little bit terrifying on the one hand that neurotechnology would be used for trying to understand how a brand might reach you better. But on the other hand, it would be how a brand might reach you better. So we have we have needs. We have entertainment needs. We have physical needs. So matching what is appropriate for you, I think, is actually a great thing. And the trick, is, of course, is going to be, again, informed consent. So in other words, we have to know with these technologies, they're not sort of wache underneath what's going on, but they're explicit, and we are in control of of our interactions with them. So I ultimately believe that that can be a powerful thing, but as we've talked about from the beginning, power can work two ways.
Yeah.
So what's your term? What's your
So providing the context, so a second right as part of our framework that we're working on is the right to cognitive liberty and interactive agency. So it fits right into what you're talking about. And so the AI manipulation problem is where AI-powered systems impart targeted influence on individuals through their reactions and repeatedly adjust tactics to maximize persuasive impact. So we already know that it exists. We've already got a term for it. We've got a term for everything. So put that in the alphabet soup or the concoction that we're creating here, talking about with the discussion of the what ifs and how and all of that, as we determine. Once again, we're collecting all that data, that personal, that PHI, and that they've opted in for, right? But what are we doing with it, and how are we accessing and assessing it, and is that ethical? Is that right? Are we looking at that dignity aspect as foundational?
Right.
Great question. Thank you. Well, Dr. Viirre, April, thank you so much for your time and expertise today. And thank you, the audience, for asking incredible questions. If you want to chat with us, we're on LinkedIn. We're very accessible. Definitely follow XR Safety Initiative. Follow Dr. Viirre's research. It's incredible. And we'll hope to see you again next year at AWE 2025. Thank you.